Moonlight has a funny way of making even the most mundane things seem extraordinary. As I walked through the narrow cobblestone alley, childhood tales of vampires and villains danced in the corners of my mind. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls, creating shapes that seemed alive. Everything felt sharper in the chill night air. The smell of wet stone, distant laughter mingling with the sound of clinking glasses from nearby pubs, and the faint metallic tang of anticipation mixed with fear. This alley was notorious for its hidden dangers, though it wasn't known for its safety anyway. Whispers of conspiracies or revolutionary plots usually lingered in the dark corners. Yet it was an oddity in itself to end up alone in this path, especially tonight. A rustle behind a garbage bin suddenly sent an uneasy thrill down my spine. There's something to be said for the feeling of being watched. You never quite forget it. Just as my mind, in its usual sarcasm-laced tone, concocted a news headline about a foolish mortal wandering in hostile territories, a sound interrupted. A low growl, defensive and predatory. It was subtle at first, almost conspiratorial, if sounds could be such. The growl emerged from a shadow that began to unravel, stretching and forming into a looming figure. The man's grin was an advertisement for trouble, a promise of unfortunate events, daring me to step closer into its snare. His eyes, gleaming under the moon's spotlight, locked onto mine like an impending catastrophe. Inside, I calculated escape routes, each one ridiculously improbable. Great. Jew. But before any dreadful conclusions could materialize, a presence far more formidable interrupted the scene. He moved like liquid midnight, a soft flicker of dark whispers against the moonlit canvas. Vampire? On any other night, the notion would have been met with skepticism and hilarity. But now, here, in this edgy tableau of dusk, I had no questions left for disbelief. His eyes, a deep, endless abyss, were fixed on the aggressor, a silent command in the voids. The world momentarily took a deep breath. Is this really necessary? A voice colder than October winds cut through. Yet there was something soothing about it, an obvious authority wrapped in velvet, leaving room for denial but grudgingly stealing it away all the same. The man stumbled. Didn't see you there, he mumbled, terror pulling on his edges. He glanced at me, a calculated plea or perhaps realization of his own vulnerability, before scuttling into the blackness like a leaf carried by the night, an acknowledgement of defeat, or more likely, surrender to a more compelling force. I stood there, partly frozen, partly drawn to unravel this unexpected savior, an amalgam of elegant menace and oddly comforting solitude. His figure belonged here among shadows, but a whispering voice, unfamiliar yet annoyingly persistent, tugged at my senses and suggested otherwise. Ancient magic swirled in the air between us, and words fought for position in the forgotten corners of my mind. Savin. Gani had stirred something, a memory, not mine, but curiously innate, echoing against my hearts, urging them awake. He glanced my way, a simple look that in its proximity seemed to reveal hidden truths. His features softened briefly. "You should be more careful," he murmured, advice coded in genuine concern, almost controversial in its naked humanity. I wondered if there was a hidden script behind this exchange. What unspoken insights had carved out this meeting? As I tried to translate the universe's quiet language, he turned as if to leave, something drawing him away before it had any right to. But a slow hesitation faltered his movements. The world paused again. didn't hide that we were perhaps on paths meant to entwine, albeit whispered with danger and secrecy. "Thank you," I managed, before our worlds could continue their solitary spin. Simple words, yet they held a weight we both felt. It was far more than gratitude. A connection suddenly sprouted, as if yearning to challenge destiny's whims. He shivered slightly. A flicker of surprise or recognition played across his otherwise composed features, hinting at an intrigue that defied his initial nonchalance. Human emotions were a minefield he seemed reluctant to traverse, but whether echoes of past or present desires, his eyes betrayed him. Melting darkness, painting 100 unsaid savories across the night. Subtle recalibrations in personal stances unfolded. An awakened curiosity, undeniably contrary to a vampire's tendency for isolation, broke its silent vow of distance. And there I was, an unwitting anomaly, his orchestrated world. Would I become a stitch in yielding shadows meant only to observe and conceal? Or was this encounter the very breach layer he'd unconsciously looked for, questioning the presence of human vulnerability that somehow mirrored his own dormant heart? We parted, our connection still alive, but neither could deny it. Whatever thing had grown in the moonlit alley nestled between our hearts. Two unpredictable pieces shifting in the puzzle's gentle whimsy. Our worlds might scar each other, but possibly bring hope to dark corners yet unexplored. The foggy breath of twilight painted the tone in muted whispers, the air tinged with a soft chill that mingled with the scent of rain-soaked earth. It was a night that felt as though the world was holding its breath, waiting. Beneath the dim glow of street lamps, I walked, my footsteps echoing in the quiet, my mind somewhere between the shadows and light. What brought me back here, to this unknown starting point where emotions flicker like moths around the flame? Was it mere curiosity or something deeper, a pull stronger than any practical reason my guarded mind could concoct? It didn't matter, not when the stars themselves seemed to conspire in rhythms unseen, bright pinpricks against the velvet sky, urging my feet onwards. And there he was, as if summoned by some unspoken command, the
"We vampire lord, whose presence was as commanding as the night itself." His silhouette drew my gaze, a sharp contrast against the milky haze, standing with an elegance only centuries of solitude could refine. This encounter, unexpected yet strangely familiar, summoned within me a mix of fear and foolish courage. We hadn't exchanged words since that alley, but often our eyes would meet, sparking conversations unvoiced, yet profoundly felt. Tonight was no different. He regarded me with a stoic expression that softened at the edges, intrigue subtly woven into his gaze. And in that silent dialogue, I found myself unraveling slowly, a ball of yarn at the mercy of playful, curious fingers. "What brings you out this late?" he queried, his voice deep and resonant, a melody that seemed to reach beyond.
The tangible. His tone was casual, yet the layer beneath was charged with questions that didn't ask to be answered. I shrugged, offering a smile that felt coy, even to me. "Just wondering," I replied. "Or maybe searching for—" The sentence hung unfinished, a thread left unknotted, hanging heavy in the crisp air. His reaction fascinated me endlessly. A single eyebrow raised, a subtle yet powerful gesture, revealing a tapestry of calculations never uttered. Searching? For something? Or perhaps someone? For a moment, we stood there, the world reduced to the small expanse between us, a quiet battlefield full of lingering glances and silent questions, a million things unsaid, igniting slow fires within, embers warming spaces we'd long marked as forbidden. And we both knew this was not a plan. A tone for careless words. "Do you ever get tired of pretending?" I blurted out, regretting my recklessness the instant the words escaped into the silence, but there was no taking them back. His eyes narrowed slightly. It was an odd, intimate dance, this exploration of vulnerability and hidden truths, in movements, posture, the twitching of lips trying to suppress a reaction. "Pretending," he mused, his tone thoughtful, a mystery in itself. "And what, pray tell, am I pretending?" "Aloofness, maybe," I replied, trying to match his calm even as my heart drummed a wild rhythm. There was a pause, heavy with potential, a moment where shadows seemed to band together in muted symphony. His gaze coaxed onto mine, a challenge, a revelation, and perhaps a fraction of understanding. "If there is pretense, then perhaps it's mutual," he finally murmured, words like silk drawn over glass. The truth of it hung there, suspended in our shared gravity, difficult yet freeing. We stood on the precipice of something unknown, almost conspiratorial, aware of the fracture lines spreading beneath our feet, shifting the ground of hearts involved in unscheduled fall. The night grew darker around us, the city breathing its own gentle lullaby. Yet in those few moments, in our silent pact of vulnerabilities revealed through glimpses, the world seemed a little brighter, like it held a secret we were still unraveling. As if on cue, a cool breeze swept between us, carrying the sharp scent of lavender and damp leaves. His cloak fluttered, wrapping him in a fabric akin to shadows, while my jacket did little to shield against the chill. I shivered, sparks of sensation dancing across my skin in the wake of his unbroken stare, the kind that pierced through darkness like light, unsettling in its honesty. "Do you despise solitude as much as I do?" I asked, determined now to dance the edge of conversation. There was a shift, subtle but undeniable, as if with those words, somewhere deep inside, a lock had turned, easing the tension that clung to him. "I find it comforting," he answered softly, yet his eyes told a different story, one of wariness mingled with an unspoken longing. A moment unfolded, a slow, deliberate unraveling of emotions veiled beneath mortality, surrounded by questions too rich. "Comforting," I echoed, letting the word linger like an unfinished symphony, exploring the territory between comfort and confinement, something we both understood too well. He smiled then, faintly, an act of diplomacy, vulnerability hidden beneath layers of eternity. It was a gesture that held gravity, suspended between sympathy and an acceptance of fate, unwritten but felt. Our eyes met again, and within each other's gaze there lay a hint of recognition, epiphany, a silent pact against the conventions drawn between Earth and Twilight. An understanding, even amidst our complicated, precarious companionship. That night, with all its mysteries, marked the place where curiosity overruled, led caution, where the esoteric beat of the heart determined a path beyond rhythm. The rain was relentless, a whispered secret that danced on rooftops and seeped into forgotten corners. It turned the city into a blurry painting, streets gleaming beneath the faded glow of lamplight, casting reflections that shimmered like liquid dreams. I found myself wandering here, drawn inexplicably toward fate's invisible threads, unsure whether I chased them or was ensnared in their delicate weave. I rounded a corner and paused, a peculiar scent of melancholy, or was it petrichor, lingering in the air. It led me to the source, him, a figure huddled against the wall, framed by flickering shadows, as if the night held him gently within its fold. Despite the rain, there was no urgency in his posture. Solemn, unbowed, he sat with his face turned upward, letting the water cleanse whatever burdened him from within. The mortal whom I had saved, now here, again, perhaps by mere coincidence. He has remained a question etched in my mind, a curiosity that refused to be answered simply. Yet I could not deny the stirring within my chest at the sight of his vulnerability laid bare, pain visible even through the veil of rain. "Odd place for reverie," I commented, my voice blending with the rain's symphony. He looked at me with eyes that held tales untold, a hint of surprise quickly masked by a steady gaze, hiding truths in plain sight. I settled beside him, an involuntary act that was as much a search for warmth as it was an attempt to shield him from the world's harsh edges. "It's just rain," he replied, but there was finality in his voice that spoke of acceptance, perhaps even a loss. Resignation to whatever storm brewed inside. I observed him, a tentative silence hanging between us. The patter of raindrops continued to weave around the contours of our unspoken dialogue. He shivered slightly, despite the warmth he tried to project. Every slight quiver, every glance downward, spoke of battles internal, and wounds that every raindrop seemed to magnify rather than cleanse. An odd resemblance to an ancient tale crossed my mind. A story of a world where trees communed through their roots, whispering wisdom through soil and bark. How this mortal reminded me of those roots, reaching out for connection, entirely unaware of the solace he inadvertently yearned for beneath his human skin. "You don't have to pretend," I murmured, lowering my gaze to meet his. There was a trust, a fragile thing, new and untested, exposed in the way he allowed his guard to falter, if only for a fleeting moment. His sigh was barely audible, yet it lingered like an unresolved chord in the symphony of the night. "There's no one here to pretend for," he admitted, pinching his shirt to wring out the excess water, a futile effort against the constant drizzle. I saw through my own reflection in his weariness, a truth rattling within, unsettling and profound. There was a trace of revenge in my heart, against fate perhaps, for leading me here, for guiding me into an emotional terrain that felt both alien and achingly familiar. I pondered conspiracies woven by fate, where a vampire would feel protective over a mortal, a notion that defied the natural order, and perhaps laughed mockingly at tradition. His vulnerability became a mirror, reflecting each crack in my own facade. I calculated the risk, to feel, to protect, to care for him, despite knowing where such attachments left beings like me, soulless, some might claim, cursed. I reached toward his hand, a motion half conscious, half instinctual, wrapping my fingers around his damp, trembling ones. Yet, as touch became reality, I sensed it, a gravitational pull, one both vital and terrifying. He stiffened momentarily, his hand frozen beneath mine, and then exercised trust again, allowing the connection to hold. "Why?" His voice trailed off, a myriad of inquiries tangled in a single word. I wondered what he wanted to ask. Why stay? Why care? Why risk? "My reasons are complicated," I found myself saying, each word slow, measured. A prose fitting of the emotional weight they carried. "Perhaps it comforts me. Perhaps," I paused, deciphering the implication in his eyes, a shared dance of silent communication. "I'm as lost as you are." He chuckled softly, a sound entwined with both irony and understanding, as if in that instant we were simply beings defined by our shared displacement, each other's harbor in the storm. There was a solemnity to our presence, a contemplation of who, or what, could find symmetry in chaos. As the rain continued, I could not help but feel the unraveling, the connections between us, explored by a hand's touch, an accidental encounter revealing the breadth of what lay hidden beneath silence. It marked something more than either dared to voice, a deeper connection, as unsettling as it was. Undeniable. The world shifted almost imperceptibly. Our paths crossed yet again under celestial whispers. In acknowledgement of fate and feeling, I knew something had begun here that neither of us could unsee, that neither wished to unsee. Emotions, long dormant beneath eternity's weight, stirred alive in a mere mortal's pain, echoing within an immortal's heart. The night pressed gently against the windows, the world outside painted in deep indigo. Shadows from the streetlights stretched long across the walls, like fingers grasping for something unattainable. We sat in silence, the gaps between words filled with a quiet reverberation of the unspoken. I found myself reflecting on his words, those haunting declarations that refused to untangle themselves from my mind. They were like echoes in a cavern, amplifying the cacophony of questions that threatened to unravel everything I believed about myself. It was uncomfortable, these fractures in my icy facade, all conspiring against the stoicism I had perfected over centuries. He sat across from me, unaware of the turmoil within, because humans were delightfully simple in their innocence. Yet complexity, tight, lay beneath his calm exterior, an intriguing contradiction that called to me with unsettling clarity. What is it about those sheltered hearts that make them captivating and dangerous all at once? He could unriddle the mysteries with a single look, a whisper of understanding that seemed to confront me effortlessly. His eyes lifted from the book he pretended to read, and there it was again, an undercurrent that dragged me down into unfamiliar territory. Despite everything, or perhaps because of it, words spilled out before caution could stop them. When your life becomes unbearably predictable, do you ever wonder about freeing yourself from it all? Onto some grand stage, perhaps? An unforeseen existence? He smiled faintly, a porous smile, one that absorbed rather than deflected emotion. Not really the stage I imagined, but it's nice not being overlooked for a change, he muttered with a hint of defiance, revealing more than perhaps he intended. The stillness surged back, ripe with possibilities. How could mere tone and inflection create such tremors beneath my carefully constructed world? His empathy burrowed through the defenses I knew needed reinforcement. Give in to the chaos, maybe, I mused aloud, half hopeful. There's solace in letting go. A moment twitched, where all things hung poised before they'd crash into unwritten destinies. He tilted his head, studying me under an inquisitive arch of sunlight that made its way between clouds outside, highlighting the edges of his uncertainty. The conspiracy of curiosity held firm, indifferent to the logic. That should keep our worlds separate. Even chaos has its own rhythm, right? I guess it's hopeful, in a twisted kind of way, he said softly, a nuanced cadence like all historic truths buried in myths and legends. His eyes lowered again, allowing his vulnerability to roam untethered. This sincerity contradicted everything I understood about survival. How does one make sense of such disarming transparency? A ready admission of insecurities that, for me, would mean perpetual danger. It tugged at memories long suppressed, those buried under regret and revenge plans of old, now surfaced by a mortal's voice. This grand stage of yours, ever considered stepping off? I spoke, intentions meshing both honesty and the urge to provoke. He laughed gently, a sound painted with the shades of resolution. Undisbelief, whether at himself or the predicament we faced, I could not discern. But in that laughter lay complicated bonds we dared not challenge. Perhaps challenging the inevitable, poles would break the fragile harmony we both hesitated to harness. Outside, life dripped like eternal stardust, silently conspiring to become our unspoken witness. His presence bridged a paradox I resisted, yet longed to explore. The unexpected familiarity rising from deep vulnerability. Could we be more than coincidental adversaries in turbulent waters, both gasping for respite? Maybe not stepping off, he exhaled thoughtfully, lifting his eyes once more, daring me to confront what even words failed to express. I suppose it's more about trusting. It's discovering who steadies you on the path. My heart imbibed a calculating twist that refused to relent. Could it be this simple? Infinitely complex, yet stark in its truthfulness. Leaning into the essence of shared comfort might mean obliterating the barriers of vengeance and solitude forged over ages. His captivation suggested it was time, even if mine needed another lifetime of revisions. In these fleeting whispers, as dubious as they were tantalizing, the undeniable pull towards this human beckoned with relentlessness. In the face of such perilous allure, the reckoning revealed itself, as conflict and intrigue danced their carefully rehearsed choreography, leaving us suspended between fate and frailty. Perhaps, I mused, cracks in the ice were never cracks at all. Perhaps they were flaws in an exquisite design, a path toward reckoning that neither of us could have imagined until now. When the rain began to fall, it did so with such haunting precision that it seemed to carry with it unspoken secrets, each drop a silent messenger in the embrace of night. Beneath the veil of darkness, shadows stretched long and whispering across cobblestones that glimmered like hidden truths beneath the city lights. There we stood, two souls adrift in the echo of clandestine moments, caught between the worlds that defined us, immortal and human, predator and prey. I found my gaze drawn to him as if by some magnetic force, pulling me deeper into his presence. His eyes, pools of earnest vulnerability against the backdrop of celestial storm, searched my own like a wanderer in desperate pursuit of home. There was a soft tremor in his voice when he spoke, a flicker of something forbidden, yet undeniably enchanting. Have you ever just wanted to understand why, even when logic fights against it? The question hung suspended in the air, a confessional right neither of us dared anticipate. My inclination was typically to retreat, to fortify the invisible walls that kept humanity at a distance. Yet here, in this moment woven from the threads of fate itself, I found my defenses wavering, my foundations shifting in the wake of his quiet courage. "What makes you ask?" I replied, feeling the weight of words like stones, each syllable rippling through the surface tension of possibility. "You," he whispered, the ghost of a smile playing at the corners of his lips, though it contained a fragile sadness, like a memory of sunlight obscured by encroaching clouds. "There's something about you that makes answers feel less important." I watched him closely, his posture speaking volumes, a flicker of open honesty in his stance, the hesitant sway of his fingers, as if reaching for but not clutching. And it was in these minute movements, in the quiet interval between heartbeats, that I felt the shards of my own resistance begin to melt away. His vulnerability was contagious, an affliction that both frightened and exhilarated me. Beyond everything, I wondered, if we are predators by nature, what does it mean to cherish what should be prey? Yet here he stood, braver than any reckoning, defying my sanctuary of solitude, daring me to walk along the razor's edge of forbidden desire. Does this human understand what he asks of me, what he risks? You speak of chaos and tranquility, like old friends, I mused, unable to fully wrap my mind around the draw that demanded opposing forces settle in the cavern of my chest. As conspiracies forged in past lives threatened to drown us, I perceived in him the vibrancy of 1,000 broken sunrises, whispering promises of tomorrows yet unnamed. He shrugged slightly, a graceful movement that bespoke understanding without pretension. The rain seemed determined to keep us company, an audience to our entwined destinies. Maybe I see past what I should look away from because, well, it's you, he said, a curious blend of awe and weariness in his tone, intensifying the intimacy of our reflection. In that vulnerable admission, we surrendered to a hidden lexicon that transcended our isolated worlds, offering solace where silence once demanded. His supremacy. Something shifted within me, a stir of apprehension, a tug of intrigue, each facet evolving into a deeper comprehension. His gaze held mine, locking together two fates that had wandered far too long in opposing orbits. Why now? Why risk it? He sought not an answer, but a map to the heart's uncertainties. And in his quest, I sensed the echoes of my own question, wrapped in fragile daring. His presence alone seemed enigmatic enough to rend the starry veil of my deception, unveiling paths unknown yet magnetic. A transparent honesty ebbed and flowed between us, each revelation a tentative step toward understanding what was previously unspeakable. Despite centuries guarded, despite revenge plans meticulously detailed through the history of endless nights, here lay a new narrative. I took a step closer, rain cascading in gentle symphony around us, each droplet a note in our shared composition of uncertainty. Inside this treacherous dance upon the wire, I confessed, the words flowing from me like pieces of a forgotten mantra. You awaken a curious chaos that is inexplicably kind. He met this truth silently, with a tenderness unclouded by fear, a decision forming as deliberate shadows traced his resolve. His eyes searched mine, a silent pact sealed in currents neither lightning nor thunder could disrupt. Maybe it was in these fragments of ceaseless wonder that we discovered something unknown, a new reality unfurling beyond the graspable, an existence unbridled by the obstacles of transient fears. And you, I said, you make me wish for dawn that never comes, yet always awaits. It was within this shared confession, woven by neither design nor discord, that we forged our fates, understanding now the delicate tapestry we had begun to embroider, a dreamscape engendered by forbidden love, a kaleidoscope lit by hidden desires. As the rain continued its gentle descent, as shadows granted us their embrace, we came to realize the path was forever altered, sealed behind the sanctuary of our intertwined destinies. The rain dwindled to a gentle mist, settling like a fragile dream woven through the air, each droplet a ghostly pearl in the dim afterglow. We stood in the stillness, our breaths mingling as faint puffs of white against the dusky backdrop. The world seemed suspended in time, briefly tethered by the gravity of our shared revelation. The alley now lay quiet, secrets held tight within its shadowed corners, as though the bricks themselves had absorbed every whispered truth from this night. My heart, habitually ensnared by shadows and ancient vengeance plots, found itself opening to an unfamiliar warmth. It was like witnessing the first glimpse of daylight after an eternity enshrouded in gloaming. I turned to face him fully. His presence was a sharp-edged silhouette against the fading storm. Miraculous and solid, like some impossible creation of nature itself. There was something grounded, something reassuringly immutable about him, as though he were a constant in the capricious dance between immortality and human fragility. My mind wandered to the peculiar fact I'd once read. Most satellites spin in perfect synchrony with their planets, locked in an endless gravitational embrace. They never pull away. "Perhaps I should have known you were a conspiracy theorist," I whispered, trenching irony in the air between us. Two beings defying inevitability. Quite the scandal. The corners of his mouth lifted slightly, an expression hesitant yet honest. He raked a hand through his damp hair, a gesture less about vanity, more about grounding himself amidst the maelstrom raging within. His eyes, those profound windows to his soul, met mine, matching my glance with an unguarded authenticity that felt almost sinister in its sincerity. It was the kind of look people spoke of in hushed tones, the kind that writes stories into history. "What do you think?" he began tentatively, his voice rich with the low timbre that I had come to find as reassuring as it was enigmatic. That we could make it work, this scandalous defiance. He tasted the words as though testing their sharpness, their potential to cut through the fabric of their lives. I considered the question carefully, the weight of his inquiry brushing against the tapestry of endless ages. It was not the first conspiracy or controversy to dance around my existence, nor would it be the last, but it was the first time I cared, and so deeply, about what unraveling it could mean. The panic of whispered truths against my immortal nature had faded, replaced by the eccentricity of a human heart beating beside mine. Once I had harbored grand revenge plans that charted my course against humanity's petty essence, but now those blueprints seemed trivial. I had done the meticulous math on vengeance, calculated every outcome against the stars aligned for centuries, and yet, here I stood, the arithmetic undone by a mortal's unyielding gaze. "We're different," I admitted, gentler now, my voice an ancient relic beneath the still sky, caught between worlds, balancing chaos with harmony. But yes, against all logic and reason, I do think we could belong. Silence settled over us as he processed the truth embedded within my words. The rain whispered its final farewell before departing for the distant mountains. He stepped closer, each footfall deliberate in the diminishing light, until he was close enough for me to catch hints of his warmth against the chill air. The scent of earth and rain lingered around him, intoxicating in its raw essence. His fingers brushed mine, a tentative exploration, the electric pulse of life against the ageless inertness of my skin sent shivers dancing down my spine. I was a conductor for this heavenly frequency, every subtle movement resonating within the hollow spaces of my heart that had been vacant for countless nights. "And you," he murmured, barely audible against the murmurous breeze, "you make me believe in dawn that never truly ends." A marvel embroidered into reality with each fiber of his soul. We lingered in the moment, the weight of future possibilities hanging delicately like stars on velvet curtains. The universe a theater, us the actors on its stageless platform. This wary embrace between our destinies unfolded with an ethereal grace, a tapestry woven not of blood or survival instinct, but sewn with threads of hope, gilded by light. Life beyond immortality promised to be no less treacherous, but this path, however uncertain, bore a luminescent promise unlike any pursued before. The bond we had formed, stitched with history's uncertainties and spontaneous revelations, bloomed within us, became something formidable enough to terrify and embolden. It was a beacon, a guiding light carved from the shadows to illuminate the way ahead, however meandering, and darkened it might be. Withdrawing slightly, he released my hand with measured reluctance, though his warmth lingered, an unseen cord tying us together despite the inch between us. In that unmarred silence between dusk and dawn, our worlds orbited past regret, past doubt, toward an embrace that fortified our resolve. We turned toward the horizon, our paths now locked in the splice of shared fate, the soft blur of tomorrow stretching before us like a watercolor memory, unpainted yet promising. In the cradle of midnight, we would find chaos and consequence, but wrapped with it came honesty carved in the tapestry of destiny. The future awaited, beckoning as a lingering phantom at the edge of the dawn, light at its peak rippling gently over undisturbed shores. And I knew, with irrefutable certainly, this was where our stories truly began.